Reading of Genesis chapter 8, 9, and 10 with side notes. King James Version, easy to understand Holy Bible audiobook. Sponsored by Lunsford's Daily Sunday School. Produced by W. Matthew Harris Senior Productions. Chapter 8, People begin to live on the earth again. Chapter 8 verses 1 through 22. Verse 1. But God remembered Noah. And God remembered all the wild animals and cattle that were with Noah. They were with Noah in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth. And the waters went down. Verse 2. God stopped the waters that were rushing up from the seas. The reading of Genesis chapter 8, 9, and 10 with side notes. King James Version, easy to understand Holy Bible audiobook. Sponsored by Lunsford's Daily Sunday School. Produced by W. Matthew Harris Senior Productions. Chapter 8, People begin to live on the earth again. Chapter 8 verses 1 through 22. Verse 1. But God remembered Noah. And God remembered all the wild animals and cattle that were with Noah. They were with Noah in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth. And the waters went down. Verse 2. God stopped the waters that were rushing up from the seas. He stopped the waters that were pouring down from the sky. He stopped the rain. Verse 3. All the time, the waters were going down. After 150 days, the waters had gone down. Verse 4. On the 17th day in the 7th month, the ark rested. It rested on the mountains called Ararat. Verse 5. The waters were still going down until the 10th month. Then Noah could see the tops of the mountains. That was on the first day in the 10th month. Verse 6. After 40 days, Noah opened the window. That is, the window of the ark that he had made. Verse 7. He sent out a raven, a fairly large black bird. The raven continued to fly about until later, when the waters had gone. It flew about until the earth was dry. Verse 8. Then Noah sent out a dove. Noah needed to know whether the waters had gone down. He needed to know whether the earth was dry. Verse 9. However, the dove did not find any dry place to settle on. It came back to the ark because the waters still covered all the earth. Noah put out his hand and he brought the dove back into the ark. Verse 10. Noah waited for 7 more days and then again he sent out the dove from the ark. Verse 11. The dove came back to Noah in the evening. It had a fresh leaf in its mouth. It had picked the leaf from an olive tree. Then Noah knew that the waters had gone down from the earth. Verse 12. Then he waited for 7 more days and he sent the dove out again. The dove did not come back again. Verse 13. In Noah's 601st year, the waters had dried off the earth. That was on the first day in the 1st month. Noah took the cover off the ark and he looked. Look! The ground's surface was dry. Verse 14. On the 27th day in the 2nd month, the earth was completely dry. Verse 15. Then God said to Noah. Verse 16. Go out of the ark. I say that to you and your wife. And I say it to your sons and your sons' wives. Verse 17. Take with you all the creatures that live. Take all the kinds of creatures that are with you. Take the birds and animals. And take every creature that crawls on the earth. Then they will have large families, and those will give birth to very many young creatures. So then they will live everywhere on the earth. Verse 18. So Noah went out, with his sons, his wife and his sons' wives. Verse 19. Every animal went out. Every creature that crawls went out. And every bird went out. Everything that moves on the earth went out. They all went out as families from the ark. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar for the Lord's honor. Noah took some animals out of every kind of clean animal. He took some birds out of every kind of clean bird. And he offered sacrifices that he burned on the altar. Verse 21. When the Lord smelled the smell, the Lord was pleased. And the Lord said in himself, I will never again curse the ground because of people. People are evil even when they are young. People want bad things and they think bad things. I punished every creature that lived. But I will never again do that, as I did then. Verse 22. While the earth exists, these things will not stop. People will sow and they will harvest. It will be cold and hot. There will be summer and winter. There will be day and night. It will always be so. Side notes: it does not matter whether or not you believe in God and or Jesus, the fact remains you are and will be subject to the judgments of God. This is a beautiful chapter. The terrible flood had destroyed the world that Noah knew. And Noah's ark, boat, was floating on the water. Noah might have been afraid. But this is not a story of despair. It is a story of hope. God had not forgotten the ark and its inhabitants. God remembered Noah, and Noah trusted God. At last, the rain stopped, and slowly, the level of the water went down. First, Noah felt that the ark's movement stopped. After some time, Noah could see the tops of the mountains. The mountains seemed bare, without any plants. But then plants started to grow again. It was as if God was creating a new world. Each week, Noah carefully recorded the progress of the waters. He sent out birds so that he would know the situation. At last, God told Noah to leave the ark. God would be kind to Noah and his family. And God would be kind to the animals and birds that left the ark. They were few in number, but their numbers would increase. Noah was grateful to God. Although there were only a few animals, Noah gave some animals as sacrifices to God. Noah wanted to please God, like Abel in Genesis chapter 4 verse 4. And God was pleased with Noah. God knew that people were still sinful, Genesis chapter 8 verse 21. God's plan was that Jesus would die in order to forgive their sins. But God made a promise to Noah. God promised to protect the earth. He will make sure that seasons and days continue. And this promise lasts until the end of the world. Notes on the verses. Verse 1. Remembered Noah means took care of Noah. Many things in this story remind us about God's creation. Before God created the earth, God's Spirit moved gently over the water. And here God made a wind blow over the water. In Hebrew, the same word means both spirit and wind. In creation, God had gathered waters together above the earth. He had gathered waters together in the seas. And here, after the flood, God collected water together again. Verse 3. The writer of this story tells us the days when things happened. He tells us how long things took. He often tells us that the water was going down. That reminds us that there was a lot of water. It was a very big flood. Verse 5. The waters were going down all the time. But at first, Noah could not see this. Noah was only able to see this after several weeks passed. God does things to help us. But He is often doing them for a long time before we know it. Verse 7. A raven is a fairly large black bird. It can fly for a long time before it gets tired. One raven went out and it did not come back. We believe that the first raven lived outside until its companion came out later. Ravens eat meat from dead animals. Many animals died in the flood. So, there was plenty of food for the raven. Verse 8. Noah probably waited 7 days before he sent out a dove. He did wait 7 more days before he sent it out again. The writer says that in verse 10. Unlike ravens, doves do not eat meat from dead animals. Doves need plants. So we can see that the plants had not yet grown. Verse 9. In the original Hebrew story, some words sound like the name Noah. Those are the words for dove and place to rest. Noah had so many creatures to look after. But even so, he still cared about the dove. Verse 10. Noah may have considered the 7th day in a week as special. There's some evidence for that. He sent the birds out at certain times. The interval between those times was 7 days. An olive tree has a special meaning. If something is like an olive tree, that thing is beautiful and fruitful. We can read in the Bible that Israel will be like an olive tree, Hosea chapter 14 verse 6. The book of Hosea is collected as one of the 12 minor prophets of the Nevi'im in the Tanakh, and as a book in its own right in the Christian Old Testament. According to the traditional order of most Hebrew Bibles, it is the first of the 12. It seems that this olive tree did not die during the flood, and now it was growing again. Verse 14. The earth had to be dry enough for all the creatures to live there. Noah had to make sure that it was dry enough. Verse 17. When God created everything, He also gave this command. He said that creatures should have large families, and they should grow in number. It was very necessary at that time, when only a few creatures were living on the earth. And when God created people, He said the same thing to them. But today the situation is different. God allows some people to have large families. But this is not God's plan for everyone. Today, very many people live on the earth. Verse 20. The writer does not tell us that Noah built altars before the flood. And he does not tell us that Noah sacrificed animals then. But Noah had probably done those things already. He did them immediately after he came out from the ark. He knew which animals he should sacrifice to please the Lord. In other religions, too, there are stories about a flood. Some things in those stories are the same as they are in Genesis. But the important things are very different. We can read these things in Genesis only. There's one God, who has power over everything. He is good and He is a fair judge. And He loves people. Noah, the man that stayed alive after the flood, was a good man. He obeyed God. Only the writer of the book of Genesis tells us about those things. Verse 21. It seemed like a new world. But people were still evil. Everybody does evil things. Only God can forgive us, because of Jesus. See Romans chapter 3 verses 23 and 24. Verse 22. God gave a wonderful promise. Because Noah obeyed God, God changed the world.
The reading of Genesis chapter 9 with side notes. King James Version. Easy to understand. Holy Bible audiobook. Sponsored by Lunsford's Daily Sunday School. Produced by W. Matthew Harris Sr. Productions. Chapter 9. Verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his sons. And God said this to them. Have very many children and descendants. And live everywhere on the earth. Verse 2. Every creature that lives will be afraid of you. That includes every animal on the earth. It includes every bird that flies in the air. It includes all creatures that crawl on the ground. And it includes the fish in the sea. I have given everything to you. Verse 3. Everything that lives shall be food for you. That is, everything that also moves. I gave the green plants to you for food. Now I give everything to you. Verse 4. You must not eat meat that still has its life in it. That is, it still has its blood in it. Verse 5. When somebody kills someone, there must be punishment. Someone will kill any animal that kills a person. Someone will kill any person that kills another person. Every person that kills his brother will die. Verse 6. If someone kills a person, then people should kill the killer. That is because God made man like himself. Verse 7. And I say this to you: have large families and have many descendants. Spread over the earth and live everywhere on it. Verse 8. Then God said this to Noah. And God said it to Noah's sons, who were with Noah. Verse 9. Look, I am confirming my covenant with you, and it is also a covenant with your descendants, who will live after you. Verse 10. And it is a covenant with every creature that is with you. That is, every creature that lives on the earth. That includes birds, cattle and wild animals. It includes everything that came out of the ark. Verse 11. I am confirming my covenant with you. Never again will I send the waters of a flood to completely destroy everything. I will never again kill all that is alive. Never again will I send a flood to destroy the earth. Verse 12. And God said, this is the thing that will especially remind you about the covenant. I have made that covenant between me and you. And it is also between me and every creature with you. That is, every creature that lives. The covenant will be for always. Verse 13. I put my rainbow in the cloud. The rainbow shall be something that especially reminds you about the covenant. That is, the covenant between me and the earth. Verse 14. I will bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow will appear in the clouds. Verse 15. Then I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you. And it is between me and every creature from all kinds. That is, every creature that lives. Never again will I send enough water to kill all creatures. Verse 16. When the rainbow is in the clouds, I will look at it. I will remember the covenant that I, God, have made with every creature. That means every creature that lives upon earth, from all kinds. That covenant will last for always. Verse 17. God said to Noah, this thing will especially remind you about the covenant. I have made that covenant between me and all creatures. That is, all creatures that live on the earth. Verse 18. Noah's sons, who went out from the ark, were Shem, Ham and Japheth. Ham was Canaan's father. Verse 19. Those three were Noah's sons. Those sons' descendants spread all over the earth. Verse 20. Noah was a man that worked on the land. He was the first person that made a vineyard, a garden where grapes grow. Verse 21. Noah drank some wine and he became drunk. He lay in his tent and he was naked. Verse 22. Ham saw his naked father Noah. Ham was Canaan's father. Ham went outside and he told his two brothers about it. Verse 23. Then Shem and Japheth took a cloak, and they laid it upon the shoulders of them both. They walked backward and they covered their naked father with the cloak. They turned their faces away so that they did not see their naked father. Verse 24. Later Noah woke and he was not drunk any longer. Then he discovered what his youngest son had done. Verse 25. So he said, Canaan has a curse. He will be his brother's slave. He will have a lower position than any other slave. Verse 26. Noah also said, let people bless the Lord, who is Shem's God. Let Canaan be Shem's slave. Verse 27. Let God make Japheth increase. Let Japheth live in Shem's tents. Let Canaan be Japheth's slave. Verse 28. Noah lived 350 more years after the flood. Verse 29. His whole life lasted for 950 years. Then he died. Notes on the verses. God is perfect, but people often do wrong things. God's covenant agreement with Noah reminds us about the wrong things that we do. It is not like God's words to the first people in Genesis chapter 1 verses 28 through 30. God spoke those words before people sinned, and he only promised good things then. But God made the covenant with Noah after people had sinned. This covenant promised many good things to people. But God also warned people in the covenant. He spoke about murder. He warned people that they would be responsible for their evil behavior. and he warned them that God would punish them for their evil deeds. People would be evil, but God is kind. He promised never again to flood the whole world, and he used the rainbow to remind people about this promise. Noah was a great servant of God, and Noah was a righteous man. But Noah was not perfect. He did something that was very wrong. He drank too much wine. His son, called Ham, saw him, and Ham gossiped. This was terrible behavior. He did not respect his father, although his father was a great servant of God. When Noah awoke, he spoke words about the future of his 3 sons. Noah spoke these words by the Holy Spirit. Because Noah was a servant of God, Ham's family would suffer because of Ham's sin. But Noah blessed his other sons. God makes a covenant with Noah. Chapter 9 verse 1 through 17 verse 1. Have very many children and descendants. God said that also when he made people in the beginning. And he said the same words in Hebrew when he made creatures. Those words mean, have large families. But they also mean, be useful and be helpful. They mean, be other people's servant. Do not expect other people to serve you. Verse 2. Here, God seems to give to people more power over the creatures. That is, more power than he gave earlier to Adam and Eve. Verse 3. Here, God permits people to eat meat as well as vegetables and fruit. Verse 4. God did not allow people to kill other people. If they did kill other people, they would be punished. He did not allow people to eat meat with blood in it. In that way, he reminded them that life is important. Life is holy. God has made us like an image of himself, so we must not kill other people. Verses 5 through 7. God's punishment was fair. If there was a murder, people should kill the murderer only. In many places, families might fight each other because somebody had murdered someone from the other family, and they might kill each other because of that. Such a situation might continue for a very long time. But God did not say that that should happen. Verses 8 through 11. God had made an agreement covenant with Noah before the flood. He told Noah about it again here, because it was very important. God included all creatures in the agreement. People must take care of God's earth and God's creatures. Verses 12 through 17. This does not mean that there were no rainbows before, but rainbows now have a new meaning. God's agreement was with all the people and animals in the entire world, and the rainbow was a sign of that agreement. Noah and his son do something wrong. Chapter 9 verses 18 through 29. Verse 20. A man that worked on the land. Noah was the master of the earth. After the flood, he became a farmer. He grew grapes, small, sweet fruit, that he made into wine. Verse 21. The writer does not hide from us the fact that Noah was not perfect. When he was naked like that, he was not giving honor to God. We can read in the Bible that wine can be pleasant, Psalm chapter 104 verse 15. But we can see here that too much wine is not good. Verse 22. People should respect their parents. Ham should have covered his father instead of staring at him. Then Ham should have said nothing, but he gossiped to his brothers. It is not certain whether Ham's son Canaan sinned too. It was Canaan that suffered as a result. God would later promise to bring his people, Shem's descendants, to a new country that was also called Canaan. The Canaanites, the people that would live there first, would be Canaan's descendants, and they would be very wicked. Verse 23. Shem and Japheth respected their father. They were careful to look away from him as they covered him. A cloak was a large piece of warm cloth. People wore it on top of other clothes during the day, and they used it as a blanket at night. Verses 24 through 25. Noah spoke about the future of his sons by the power of the Holy Spirit. So, this was not just Noah's idea. This was a message from God. We do not know when Ham's descendants became his 2 brothers' slaves, but we do know that Canaan's descendants became very evil. In fact, they were so evil that God gave their land to Abraham's descendants. and God helped Abraham's descendants to overcome Canaan's descendants. See the book of Joshua. Verse 26. One would expect Noah to say, I bless Shem, the Lord's man. It is not usual to bless the Lord of a person, but it might mean that Shem was the son that God blessed in particular. And Noah was blessing God especially because God, was Shem's God. Shem's descendants were the people that God chose specially for himself. Abraham and his descendants Israel were among Shem's descendants. Verse 27. Let God make Japheth increase. The Hebrew word for let him make bigger sounds like the name Japheth. It does not mean that Japheth would get fat. It means let Japheth's descendants increase in number and let them be more powerful. It is not clear what Noah was praying. Maybe he prayed that God would live in Shem's tents. Or maybe he prayed that Japheth would live in them. God did actually live in the tents of Shem's descendants Israel. That was because God chose that nation for himself. But this seems to be a peculiar blessing for Japheth. Probably Noah was saying that Japheth would live in Shem's tents. But we cannot discover when this happened. Many people have suggested different times. This is one possible meaning. People that were not Jews would live together with Jews. That would happen by means of what Jesus did. See Ephesians chapter 2 verses 11 through 19. Noah repeated his words about Canaan again. That showed how important they were. Verses 28 through 29. Noah lived a long life. God would not allow people in the future to live such long lives. Thanks for listening and following along.
King James Version. The reading of Genesis chapter 10. With side notes. King James Version. Easy to understand. Holy Bible audiobook. Sponsored by Lunsford's Daily Sunday School. Produced by W. Matthew Harris Senior Productions. Chapter 10. Verse 1. Noah's sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This is their family's history. They had sons after the flood. Verse 2. Japheth's sons were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech and Tiras. Verse 3. Gomer's sons were Ashkenaz, Riphath and Togarmah. Verse 4. Javan's sons were Elisha, Tarshish, the people called Kittim and the people called Dodanim. Verse 5. The nations spread along the coasts from those families. Each nation got its own language. Verse 6. Ham's sons were Cush, Egypt, Put and Canaan. Verse 7. Cush's sons were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabteca. Ramah's sons were Sheba and Dedan. Verse 8. Cush was also Nimrod's father. Nimrod began to be a powerful man on the earth. Verse 9. He was a powerful hunter. The Lord could see what Nimrod was doing. Therefore people often say, like Nimrod, who is a powerful hunter. The Lord can see what Nimrod is doing. Verse 10. The beginning of Nimrod's kingdom consisted of Babel, Erech, and Akkad. Those are all in the country called Shinar. Verse 11. From Shinar, Nimrod went into Assyria. He built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Resen. Verse 12. Resen is between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Verse 13. Egypt was the father of Ludim, Anamim, Lehobim, Naphtuhim. Verse 14. Pathruzim, Casluhim, and Caphtorim. The Philistines came from Casluhim's family. Verse 15. Canaan was the father of Sidon, his oldest son. Canaan was also the father of Het. Verse 16. He was also the father of the people called Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites. Verse 17. Hivites, Archites, Sinites. Verse 18. Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Later the families that came from Canaan scattered. Verse 19. And the country of those people spread from Sidon up to Gerar. It spread as far as Gaza. And it spread towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lisha. Verse 20. Those are Ham's sons in their families, languages, countries, and nations. Verse 21. Shem also had children. Shem was Japheth's older brother. Shem was the ancestor of all Eber's children. Verse 22. Shem's sons were Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. Verse 23. Aram's sons were Uz, Hul, Gether and Mash. Verse 24. Arpachshad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah was the father of Eber. Verse 25. Eber had 2 sons. One son was called Peleg because the earth became divided during his life. Peleg's brother was called Joktan. Verse 26. Joktan was the father of Almodad, Shalef, Hazarmaveth, Jerah. Verse 27. Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla. Verse 28. Obal, Abimael, Sheba. Verse 29. Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All those were Joktan's sons. Verse 30. They lived in a country that spread from Mesha toward Saphar. It spread to the hilly country in the east. Verse 31. Those are Shem's sons in their families, languages, countries, and nations. Verse 32. Those are the descendants of Noah's sons. The descendants are in their families and they are in their nations. From those people, the nations scattered over the earth. That happened after the flood. Notes on verses. A new part of Genesis starts here. People's life on the earth was starting again after the flood. The actual names are not very important to us, but they do show that this account is true. These people were real. They actually lived. The account shows how quickly new families were born. And it shows how quickly they grew up. Some names here are probably places' names rather than people's names. People did not stay close together. They moved to new places and they became many nations. In this list here, we read that Japheth had 7 sons and 7 grandsons. Cush's sons and grandsons together were 7 in total. That does not include Cush's other son Nimrod, whom the writer talks about separately. The writer mentions 70 nations as descendants of Noah's sons. People often used the number 70 to mean a large number. And 7 was a special number too. Japheth's family, chapter 10 verses 2 through 5. The writer begins with Japheth's sons and grandsons. Their names show us that their families moved north, towards Europe. And they moved round the sea called the Mediterranean. Ham's family, chapter 10 verses 6 through 20. Ham's family moved towards the south and into North Africa. Canaan was the original name of the country that became Israel. So Canaan's descendants are important to the history in the Bible. But Ham's descendants lived across a much larger area. Nimrod's descendants were especially powerful. Babylon would become the greatest city in the world for a short time. And Nineveh was also a very powerful city. Verse 12 mentions the great city. It is not clear whether that means Nineveh or Kala. It seems as if it is Kala. But in the book of Jonah, Nineveh is called a great city. Shem's family, chapter 10 verses 21 through 32. Shem's family comes last in this chapter, although his name comes first in verse 1. We do not know why that is so. Perhaps it is because the book of Genesis continues with the story of Shem's descendants. Many of Shem's descendants moved east. But this list also contains the names of places that are elsewhere.